Welcome to Ongezellig's Devlog1, a behind-the-scenes series on Maya's Diary's development process. Just as a heads up, this video will feature loads of early development footage and does not represent how the game currently looks. In this series, we'll be looking into the project's history and all the overall changes it has gone through along the year. Hello, I'm Sunday, and this is Maya's Diary is completely based on Studio Masa's original comic, Maya Sweet 16. The project mainly started as an animated version of the comic that I began storyboarding around summer of last year, and doing some animation tests here and there.
If you've ever read a novel that kept you wanting to find out what's going to happen next, foreshadowing is a narrative device in which suggestions or warnings about events to come are dropped or planted.
One of the sequences that I had planned for the project was an Ina-like scene made in Unity, and after a few weeks of working on it, I found out that somebody else had already made a Maya Sweet 16 animation. So I ended up scrapping the project. During that time, I couldn't get the idea of an Ongezellig video game out of my head. So, in my free time, I started sketching and making small mock-ups of how it might look like. Eventually, I decided to take my two-dimensional concepts into the 3D realm. So, I started modeling the sketches in the free open-source 3D program Blender, mainly as an excuse to relearn the software. Kind of like when I made the Adult Swim incident video as an exercise to relearn After Effects. Please go watch it, I spent a really long time working on it, please. This is the first functioning beta of the game, an incredibly bare-bones version running on an early Ina-like character controller that I made back when this was still supposed to be an animated short. And yes, we can all say that it looked rough, but it was the bare minimum that I needed to start testing out how the game's world and story might actually work. On day one, I mainly focused on creating the FPS player controller. While I have created FPS controllers in the past, most of them didn't really hold up well. Also, around this time of development, I was just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what stuck. And at the time, I was still trying to relearn how to use Unity. So a lot of the stuff that I worked on was really boring software stuff, like custom editors and small character controllers. But eventually, I ended up putting myself into a schedule. So I started like every great Unity devlog starts, and that is with a bean.
You're fired!
Now, what this bean over here is going to do is represent our player. In other words, me. And now what I gotta do is tell this bean to move. But sadly, that is easier said than done. So my job is basically to program for hours, encounter an error message, go on the Unity registry to check what I may have done wrong, and in this case it seems to be everything. So now I have to rewrite the whole code and then proceed to go on a bunch of programming forums to realize that, oh, I was reading the wrong documentation, so that means I have to rewrite the whole script again. Yay! Then encounter another error message that causes me to have an existential crisis about if I'm even good at programming. The answer is no, by the way. Then proceed to doom scroll for 3 hours on TikTok, review the error message, and realize that I'm just autistic as fuck and I have written Devlog.log instead of Devlog.log. Isn't programming fun? And all of this comes to say, we did it guys, we made a working first-person controller. From all the characters in the Ongezellig cast, the character that I had the hardest time getting down was Mai. It's that wig. That goddamn wig. For a while it looked too boxy, and then it looked too round, and then it just looked like a bot. But after a few days of struggle, I was finally able to get it down. On the second day, my task was way easier, with it being to make a simple grab and drop system that I was able to implement fairly quickly. I also created an input system that will allow me to edit all the input keys directly in the editor. The third day was mainly spent working on the environment art and fixing the old messed up topology. On day 4, I completely redesigned the dialogue UI and started work on adding bikes onto the game. Since I started this project, I wanted to add bikes like the one seen in the pilot. Mainly because I like bikes, and secondly because I want to appease the Dutch gods. So I quickly got to work and made a quick demo. That looked really bad. So after weeks, and yes, I mean weeks of work, I was able to make a functioning demo. Yeah, that happens for some reason.
Foreshadowing is a narrative device.
On day 5, I started making and finishing painted game assets. Well, yes, I could take a screenshot of the show. It would look way too low quality, and I do not want to pass it through a probably shitty image upscaler AI. So I took up the task of remaking and repainting every single poster. And while draining and having OBS crash on me multiple times, I was able to finish most of the art that I needed. And that finally brings us to the story. It was a mess.
Foreshadowing is a narrative device in which
This early draft that I had written did not make any sense at all.
Oh my god!
I completely swapped the personality traits between Maya and Coco, with me making Maya incredibly sociable. The show is called Unsociable, by the way. On an early draft of the script, Maya was going to be way more outgoing, with the game being way more exploration based and having way more dialogue options. Maya's character was also wildly out of character, with one of her arcs being her willingly joining a picture club out of jealousy of Coco having a band. Remember that this is a character that contemplated jumping down a flight of stairs just to avoid social interaction. Another draft had us following the life of a social media famous Maya in a double life-like story, in which she would be extremely sociable and extroverted online, but be a complete solar opposite in the real world. I ended up not going with the idea because it felt a bit unrealistic, and shortly after a few months of struggling with it, Lily Dross announced that she was working on a fairly similar idea. Something that I had promised myself before starting this project was that I was going to make every single asset by myself. Mainly because I want to lose the bad habit of downloading assets from the asset store, and also because a lot of smaller Unity indie titles are known for abusing a lot of those tools, with a lot of them ending up becoming asset fest games that just look kinda bad, to be honest. And also it was just because I wanted to relearn how to use Blender. While yes, I've always used Blender when it has come to my channel, it just looked really bad, and also topology was something that did not exist in my mind, so a lot of the things that I made just looked horribly from the inside and out. So after a few months of relearning how to use Blender, I'm really happy with my results. But this also comes at a cost, and that is just, well, having to make every single asset of the game by myself. While I do love using Blender, it does become quite exhausting when I have to do all the assets by myself, which can become incredibly time consuming, especially when you account UV unwrapping, texturing, and just normals. And yes, I do have a file in which I have every single object that will repeat, so I can just drag and drop them in the engine. It still takes a lot of time, but the good thing is that I generally like using Blender, so yeah. Fuck 3ds Max. And this is just kind of it. I've been working really hard on the project and I'm really excited to show you more, but that will come in the next Devlog. I'm so sorry for the lack of updates and I hope that I can be more consistent. And on way better news, I can finally announce that the game has gone from alpha to outright beta, and a lot of the game's score is finally getting finished. Something that I also want to be really clear about is that I don't want to rush this game's development. I really care for this project and I already know what happens when you try to rush up things. And I really just don't want to end up like most Ongezellig projects and have to abandon it. I also been thinking a lot about my channel and what direction I want to take it in, and I will talk about this in another devlog. But just to get the gist of it, I just want my videos to be better. I have a lot of old videos that kind of really do suck, mainly because I didn't really spend a really long time working on them, and it's really reflected in the quality of them, with me having really lukewarm takes and just not really expanding on the things that I wanted to talk about, mainly because of time constraints that I kind of imposed on myself, so I might be remaking some of those videos. And well, this has been Sunday. Like if you like, dislike if you dislike, follow me on Twitter and Instagram because like 10 people follow me, and see you in the next. Welcome to Ongezellig1. And I haven't even read what the fuck it says. A behind the scenes series about Maya's diary development process. Ever since I started work on the project, I almost fucking fell. Since I started the project, the character that I had the hardest time getting down was my mind. Mainly because I like bikes, and secondly because I want to appease the... Since I started this project, for a while the wig looked too boxy.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.